This is a production of Gordon College's Scot Radio.
Scot Radio.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Photo Finish, Scot Radio's home for motorsports. I'm your host, Ben Schneider, joined once again by recurring guest host, Chase Draus. Chase, welcome back.
It's good to be back. So, from what Ben has told me, it's been a crazy week in motorsports.
Yeah, some news yesterday morning, kind of out of left field, but I don't think anybody saw it coming. So Roger Penske, just kind of bought IndyCar and its most prestigious racetrack.
Yeah, that's not
Yeah, just a minor story we'll cover here, and then we'll get into the main topics here on the show. But
I mean, okay, when you first told me this, I seriously thought you were lying, because I literally was in my room, I'm studying for an exam, and then all of a sudden I hear Ben knocking at my door, and I'm like, oh, great, he's going to complain to me about something with the radio again. And then all of a sudden he's like, dude, Penske just bought IndyCar. And I'm like, hold up, what? Because IndyCar, for those of you who don't know, but obviously most of you probably do know, considering the fact that your following is mostly full of motorsports fans, IndyCar is literally one of the biggest racing, organizations in the world. I mean, it has, correct me if I'm wrong, it has national recognition in terms of...
Definitely national, yeah, I'd say international.
Yeah.
Especially with Alonso coming to the 500 the last couple of years.
It's one of the most diverse, because honestly, there's racers from all over the world, and just all of a sudden casually bought, it's just like, excuse me, what? I'm kind of annoyed, because honestly, in motorsports, this is blowing up, but honestly, I think we got a brief ESPN article, oh yeah, it's...
Jake Query was saying on Twitter last night that in Indiana, on 7 News or whatever, it was not one of the lead stories. And you would think that, especially for that region, this would be huge, major breaking news here.
I'm kind of ticked off at ESPN because, honestly, I've seen more in-depth articles about LeBron James being a nice guy than, what is going on right here. So we're going to cover that as much as we can for you. And it's weird because normally I feel like I'd be talking about this kind of stuff on my show.
Kind of like Robert Kraft's, you can't really make a comparison here, but if you were to make a comparison, maybe like Robert Kraft buying the NFL. It's.
I think it would be. I'd take it even another step further. I think it'd be like the owner of Manchester United buying the MLS, because it's literally a team
or
that
the Premier League over there.
It's a team that has dominated, has made a name for itself. Arguably one of the biggest. Penske Racing is one of the most known racing organizations in the world. I mean, I can't think of a lot of other names that are bigger than Penske.
Yeah.
And
they've won in almost every division that they've competed in.
I mean, it's kind of like, like at esports, the FaZe clan, where this is basically every time they're in, there was always a contender. Same thing with Penske. Every time they're in it, they're always a contender. And just all of a sudden, casually, oh yeah, we're going to buy IndyCar. They literally made it so casual. It's just just going up to buy some groceries, and I'm going to purchase an entire motorsports organization. Excuse me? And there was nothing on this at all. That's what shocked me, because, when you had, the the Marlins, literally, when they were oh yeah, we're going up for sale, it was a big deal. Every day on ESPN until about 3 weeks after, it was covered on okay, who's the owners? How is it going to be divvied out? Are there going to be responsibilities? Oh, Jarek Dieter is now throwing his hat in there as a consultant. How is this going to work out? This was literally just completely out of left field. Just just going to casually drop the fact that we just bought this. It's excuse me?
Yeah. So just to be clear, this is technically Penske Entertainment Corporation acquiring Hulman Company. Of course, the Hulman George family's owned Indianapolis Motor Speedway for 74 years, I guess, really since 1945 after World War II. The Speedway had kind of fallen into disarray, and if you remember my story on Nazareth Speedway a few weeks ago, it didn't look too unlike what Nazareth looks like today. There were weeds growing out of it. The facility was in desperate need of repair in order to be saved, and Tony Hulman stepped in and saved the Speedway and revived the Indy 500, and it's
one of the biggest races in the world.
Yeah, boomed into the tradition we know it as today. And his family has continued being on the board and owning the Speedway and kept the tradition on ever since he purchased it. And now control of that goes over to one of the biggest icons in motorsports, definitely here in the United States and perhaps even all over the world.
Yeah. So how much did it exactly go for? Do we know that yet?
Well, they said everything was confidential, so they didn't reveal the exact numbers, but I feel like I've seen anywhere from 500 million to 2 billion, probably closer to the 500 million range.
I think at least $1 billion. Like, 'cause,
Yeah,
I mean,
it certainly did not come cheap.
Yeah, I mean, but I think if you look at it from a business side, Penske made a very big investment, and I think it's going to be a risky investment. Because, I mean, obviously, motorsports is, in terms of popularity, I mean, international, I don't think it's going to be a problem. IndyCar has always been popular overseas. But, here in the States, it's been kind of rough. But, I mean, it opens a lot of new possibilities for, because, I mean, if anyone's going to be able to do it, it's going to be Penske. I'm still a firm believer that we need to have an IndyCar race that is in the streets. Like, have a race in Boston or have, like, a race in, Miami, Chicago. I'd still would love to see something like that, and I feel like the Penske family would have enough pull to actually pull it off because I know they definitely know how to advertise. So I'm really excited for this, but see what they're going to do.
I know we got so close with Boston a few years ago, and then it fell through at the 11th hour. But yeah, I mean, Chase, I want to ask you, is this one of the biggest sports acquisitions ever? I feel like it's up there.
It's definitely up there. I mean, there's a lot of different acquisitions that you could talk about. When the Green Bay Packers, essentially decide, hey, we're going to be owned by the public and essentially be owned by stock. I feel like that was kind of a big deal because it was really a monumental thing. I mean, most of the early years of like the NFL, teams kind of getting settled and stuff like that. And really, I would say, acquisitions in terms of, I would say Las Vegas with the Golden Knights when they acquired the rights to an NHL franchise. Because, I mean, right now, the Vegas Golden Knights have one of the highest attendance records in the NHL. And, I mean, really, it's kind of early to say it's one of the greatest acquisitions of sport because, obviously, this is their third season. It's kind of hard to say, oh, yeah, they're a mainstay in the NHL. They've been here for 3 years. They haven't really built a name for that. But when you think of the weight of the Indy 500, that is the one race of the year. I can guarantee you, first off, my dad's going to be watching that on his, recliner. I can guarantee you I'm going to be trying to watch it, if I'm not, busy with anything else. Obviously life as a college student is very difficult. Usually the Indy 500 has pretty decent ratings. I mean, if I'm not mistaken,
We're up a little bit this year on NBC.
Yeah, and I mean NBC advertised it very well, because
and that's one of the things I'm excited about that I think has been missing. I think the Hulman George family has done a good job, but one of the areas where they were lacking was social media with the series and trying to push content out like that, advertising, marketing. That's something that I think Penske as a businessman is really looking to push. So I think that could be a very good thing because if you take a look at Formula One's YouTube channel compared to IndyCar's YouTube channel, I mean, there's no comparison. Yeah. Like F1's got highlights of every session and every race weekend, and IndyCar might upload a classic race every other week or something, but there's no comparison in terms of how good the content is that F1's putting out compared to.
And I mean, we can't really disclaim what the family has done. Hulman and George have done a great job with Indy. And really, there's two racetracks I love. It's the New Hampshire Motor Speedway for obvious reasons, and the Indy 500. I mean, that was the one race growing up as a kid where I was just like, this is the big one. Like, as a NASCAR, fan, as a NASCAR fan, that's the one time where it's like, yeah, I'm going to go over to the other side and watch this one because honestly, this it's like one of the big races of the year. So, I mean, it holds a lot of stock. And I mean, really, the family built that up. So where it's like, it is, a big deal. But, obviously, innovation needs to take place. The family hasn't been doing a great job of that. So, because it's kind of more of just like, okay, we're just going to kind of rinse and repeat, and just kind of hope something happens so that we can kind of cover it and, kind of throw a monkey wrench at the system, if you will. But now that, the Penske family is involved, I think it's going to be there's going to be a lot of changes, which can be a good and a bad thing. Because, I mean, old does not mean dead and new does not mean best. So famous words from Corey Taylor right there. But so I think it's going to be, I think it's time will tell, but I think for the most part, this is going to be a good deal for race fans.
And I think something that's been overlooked in all this breaking news and everything is that we joke that Roger Penske is ageless, but he's going to be 83 in February. So realistically speaking, how long is he going to be the one who's active in making the decisions and running the facility?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. The guy, you know, I could have sworn he was 60. I mean, I think the big question right now is, did he make this for himself, for him to kind of have, you know, this whole turnaround and, you know, like, I'm going to do it myself, or did he do it for his family so that they could take the reins and kind of like, okay, this is your guys' you know, deal, you know, see if you guys take control and you guys can make this thrive, and I'm just going to be able to correct you along the way. So, I mean,
I think we're seeing his sons and his business partners in most of the publicity that we're getting here with this whole purchase. So I feel like that's kind of a direction that it's going to go. But yeah, I know, Chase, you mentioned NASCAR briefly. A lot of people have fallen out of love with the Brickyard 400, which is, of course, a NASCAR race of a track. At one time was pulling in about 250,000 fans and was a really prestigious NASCAR event. Drew a lot of attention, not only because of the facility, but because the racing there was usually pretty good. The racing in Indianapolis has not been very good in recent years, particularly with the Gen 6 car. And after the whole tire debacle in 2008, fans started to leave. Attendance has been down steadily every year. But yeah, I mean, some fans have called for NASCAR to leave Indianapolis. It's gotten that bad. And Penske has kind of mentioned totally the opposite in passing here, with this news obviously being more IndyCar themed since he's also buying the series. But they mentioned the NASCAR race of a track, and he says he sees no reason to remove it. If anything, they want to push it even more, try to make it the best it can.
I mean, then the Brickyard 400, I mean, like, obviously Kiss the Bricks, you know, like, that's been a staple so long. And I think for NASCAR just to kind of like, we're going to jump ship because it's not really selling that well. First off, I think it's foolish because Indianapolis has one of the best tracks in the country. It's just one of those stadiums where you just know, like, oh, it's a big deal. Because it's like, you know, look at the names, look at the games that have been played here. Same thing with NASCAR, where it's like, you know, or same thing with just motorsports in general. Like, Indianapolis 500 has had countless classic races where it's just like, just incredible races. So, I mean, I think NASCAR, they need to keep doing it, but I can also see if they kind of jump ship because, I mean, honestly, they've been ruining everything else that's been good about the sport. So, I mean, why not add another nail to the coffin? But
yeah, well, I think Penske even mentioned something which I think caught a lot of people's attention. He talked about the possibility of bringing IMSA to the track, and IMSA, of course, sanctions the 24 Hours of Daytona. So could you install lights in Indianapolis and run a 24-hour race there, or maybe even bring F1 back, which... I mean, that deal kind of ended not in the best circumstances with the whole tire issues in 2005 that resulted in a 6-car race, but...
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see F1 come back. Do I think they're going to do it? Probably not. Because, I mean, it's not even necessarily that, you know, oh, well, yeah, F1 needs this race. It's like, no, F1's doing fine. Like,
yeah, and you know, F1's got the race in Austin now that, ironically enough, just happened this weekend. Very successful again. And the race in Miami, you got to think, is this close to getting off the ground. So do we really need... I feel like 2 races, if there is a country that can host 2 F1 races, it's a country like the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Spain, like bigger countries like that with more of a following. I don't know if we need to bring 3 races to one country. So especially if you get this Miami race off the ground, I don't know if it...
I can see why. And I mean, you think about it, they could easily just do a tour, so it's like not as much travel on, you know, the teams, or it's like, you know, all right, you're going to fly to the U.S., then you're going to fly back to Germany, and then you're going to fly back to the U.S., and then you're going to fly back to Spain, and then you're going to fly back all the way to, you know, Indianapolis. I think they could just do a tour and, you know, make it happen. I mean, kind of similar to what the kind of like what WWE does, where it's just like, all right, we're just going to kind of go along this track, and you're just going to travel, you know, state to state and go from there.
Yeah, so, and keeping on the NASCAR subject here, there's been a lot of talk with Joseph Newgarden testing, and not really testing, but doing some demonstration laps in an IndyCar of Charlotte Roval. people want to see a NASCAR IndyCar doubleheader at the same track on the same weekend.
I think that'd be fun. I really would love to see that kind of race.
Yeah. I would too. I feel like if you can get like as much cross promotion as possible, it can only be beneficial to introduce new fans to both sides.
Yeah, no, I think really having, that cross promotion would be very beneficial for really all teams involved. Because, you think about it. Oh, hey, we're going to go to the NASCAR race. Well, the IndyCar race is also here. And, it's only like, what, extra, like $50 per ticket. Why not make a vacation out of it? So, I think it'd be very good for race fans because, think about it. You're getting 2 high-quality races, for essentially, I don't want to say cheaper, but, a lot more convenience. So I think it'd be worth definitely looking into.
Yeah, so another major talking point that we talked a little bit about last May, Roger Penske was among the owners that wanted guaranteed entries for full-time IndyCar teams at the Indy 500. Now that he's the owner of a series and he's kind of taking a step back from his race team, I feel like it's more in his best interest to have as many competitive, noteworthy days at the Speedway as he can have, and that would include Bump Day obviously being a major part of the month of May. So do you think his stance on Bump Day might change?
I think he's going to stick to his guns here, and I'm not necessarily happy with that. He's a visionary, but he also, if he thinks a system's better, he's going to implement it. I am a firm believer in Pump Day. I really like the idea because having the best racers race, it's kind of it's a race. Like, who's the fastest that day? Not, just because you have a historic season, just because he had a really good, couple races beforehand, should he just automatically get in? You gotta earn your way in. Like, it's the same thing, like qualifying for, any sort of, like track and field event cross country, where it's like we have certain minimums you have to meet, and if you can't meet them, tough luck. So,
yeah, and Penske, of course, you think in 1994 they had the engine that was so powerful that nobody could beat them at Indianapolis. They totally dominated that year, and then the very next season they can't get the setup right, and both their cars actually got bumped.
Yeah.
So,
well, I have a couple concerns with Penske buying this organization, but the big one for me would be him making some rule changes that wouldn't benefit really the races in the long run. So,
yeah. Well, the first thing that I thought of when I saw the news was, well, Roger Penske runs 3 full-time cars, so isn't that a pretty big conflict of interest if he's running the Speedway and owning and operating that, and the racing series too? But then I remembered Penske literally owned CART, who was one of the 3 major owners of CART, which of course predated the IndyCar Series, and Tony George also owned Vision Racing, which competed in the IRL, so this isn't unprecedented, and it hasn't seemed to be a major issue in the past. I don't expect it to be.
I think he's going to do what's best
here
for business. And if he were to, say, oh, yeah, we want all full-time teams to get in, and they automatically get a head start above everyone else who isn't, and then kind of making sure that his teams, oh, yeah, hey, he has his engine there has a couple things that don't exactly align with what, the rules are. We'll just let it slide because it's Penske. Like, things like that obviously would be cause for concern, but I think Penske would know, like, all of a sudden if all of his racers just start winning there and just continue to win, it's kind of going to get a little suspicious. So I think he'll be able to handle it, but I'm not quite sure if it's going to be as smooth as people are going to think it's going to be.
Yeah, well, and he's taken steps to make sure his credibility is not at risk here. I think he's doing a good job of that. He's already stepping down. He's currently the race strategist for Will Power. Of course, he's a Team Penske driver in the IndyCar Series. He's stepping down from that role. I think he's going to have less involvement in the day-to-day operations of his race team while he focuses on the Speedway and the racing series. So I don't foresee it becoming a major issue.
I mean, I don't think anyone's going to foresee it as a major issue, but later down the line, that's when I'm going to start getting concerned, where it's like the little things that people just miss, and then all of a sudden it just blows up. So, but don't let my concerns fool you. I am really excited about this acquisition because I feel like it's going to be a positive impact, not just on IndyCar, but like motorsports in the U.S. in general. Because I feel like if anyone's going to be able to reach the new age of race fans, I feel like it's going to be Team Penske. So,
yeah, I think there are some really good things that come out of this. That can come out of this, I should say. Namely, an IndyCar video game. Roger, I'm sure you've got plenty of other priorities that would come before that, but that's something a lot of us would be interested in seeing. It's been a long time. So
I mean, I'm not a particular racing fan in terms of video games. I mean, every time I play Mario Kart and I lose, I end up throwing a controller. But I mean, I might make the sacrifice for an IndyCar video game because I feel like it would be, if it's done right.
The FIA European Truck Championship has a legit licensed video game, but IndyCar doesn't.
Well, I mean, NASCAR has a video game too, but doesn't mean it's good and doesn't mean it's actually worth playing. I mean,
NASCAR.
For heaven's sake,
we could spend a whole show on why the NASCAR Heat Series is underwhelming and everything, but
I kind of want to do that now. Well, I love critiquing video games.
Maybe over the winter when there's not as much news breaking.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like Supercross has a video game. Monster Jam has, a long history of video games. Like if those series can get an officially licensed game, what?
I mean, if Crash Bandicoot can get a racing game, and what was it? Mario and Sonic can get a video game going off the ground. IndyCar should definitely be able to get something.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So I'm sure we're going to cover this story as it continues to develop in the coming weeks and months, and who knows where all it's going to go and what all is going to happen, but we do have some more news to get to. It was kind of a bad day, I guess, for this news to break because it broke right after the Penske news, and I think everybody kind of overlooked it, but Kyle Busch is going to run the Rolex 24 Daytona next year. He's going to join AIM, Vassar Sullivan Lexus, and of course Lexus is the luxury brand for Toyota, who he drives for in NASCAR. More details are still to be determined, but I always like seeing NASCAR drivers come over to do that race and seeing crossovers.
It's going to be a fun time. Because, I mean, the 24-hour series, they're a pain in the butt to watch, I'm not going to lie, because it's just like, especially from someone who's coming from a commentary background, it's like, and they're going. And it's just like really repetitive for like 24 hours. It would be very, very stressful. But I think this is going to be a good thing for NASCAR to get that free publicity with Busch, especially if he wins. So, I mean, there's a little bit of weight on there for Busch to do well, because if he does well, then it would open the possibility for more NASCAR drivers going out to do more races and kind of bringing more attention internationally to NASCAR.
Yeah. I think of Jeff Gordon winning the Rolex a couple years ago, and that was a pretty big deal. So it'd be great to see Kyle have some success there. All right, some more major news that broke in the last week. F1's 2021 regulations were, at least the first part, were kind of introduced. A whole outline for rule changes and changes to the cars and regulations for team spending and all sorts of good stuff. So basically, what you need to know, the very basic stuff, the cars have been redesigned to limit the effect of dirty air on the car following, a.k.a. what NASCAR fans are begging the sanctioning body to do right now in their series. F1 can figure it out, but NASCAR can't, I guess.
This is why F1 is better than NASCAR. But we're not talking about that right now. I mean, it seems like such a simple fix, but NASCAR just, for lack of better terms, can't get their head out of their rear and do something about it. But, that's not my problem as I, sip my tea behind my microphone that you guys can't see.
Yeah. F1 can do this. Why can't NASCAR do it? Obviously we're not going to know the true effects until in a couple of years we see the cars out on track, but it's going to be really good for a lot closer racing and hopefully increasing natural overtakes without DRS necessary.
All right, so for someone who doesn't know what dirty air is, what's like the easiest way you can kind of explain it to someone who doesn't know what that is?
So basically it's air that comes off the car that is ahead of you and goes into your engine and system and everything, and hinders your performance, weakens your handling. It just overall hurts your performance.
Okay.
Makes it a lot harder to try to go for a pass or an overtake or whatever. So,
Yeah.
and ultimately, that's not good for the quality of racing.
Yeah, no, just could clarify, because, I mean, I kind of had a rough idea, but, again, all the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, sure. Well,
and I know how to debate, but, yeah, I think this is good for F1, especially if they can pull this off. F1 is really where it's at. Like, if you want to, be a racer, if you're an F1 driver, you made it. Like, that's your peak. Like, I don't think you could do any better than F1. So if they're able to pull this off, it'll definitely trickle down into other organizations.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, drivers reaching F1, there's also something new that's going to hopefully give more people a chance to reach F1. Teams are now required to give their development drivers or test drivers, reserve drivers, whatever you want to call it, or a rookie at least 2 free practice sessions throughout the season. So I think this is a very good change. Certainly it's going to open the door for more people to get actual time, not in a race, but at least in a practice session in a legit F1 car. I think only good things can come from that.
I mean, it also gives the opportunity for more development in terms of the quality of the racer, which you obviously mentioned, and I think it gives an opportunity to kind of give more scouting towards the F1 drivers and even other organizations where it's like, hey, F1 isn't taking a shot, but we'll take a shot on you. Like, have IndyCar or someone like swoop in and just be like, hey, you're not really getting attention here, but we could give you a spot, and you kind of steal that. So I think it'd be good, but I mean, I only see good things coming from giving people a shot just to do something. I mean, I don't normally agree with you on everything, but so far we have pretty aligning opinions on this one.
Yeah, and then another major thing we should note, there's now a spending cap of $175 million that will go towards research and development for the teams building their cars and chassis. The cap does not cover things such as marketing, driver salaries, etc. So McLaren, if they still had Fernando Alonso, would still be free to pay him $40 million or whatever ridiculous amount they were giving him. Mercedes doesn't have to worry about Lewis Hamilton having to take a pay cut. So you're still going to see bigger teams with bigger budgets, I think, have a bit of an advantage here because they can use that money for different areas that aren't going into their cars. But I think in terms of actually bringing the gap from the big 3 teams to the midfield a little bit closer, I think this could be really beneficial.
It will be. Every sports league that I can think of, not even just necessarily, in terms of motorsports, but they have some sort of salary cap, except for the MLB, but the MLB it's an old boys club. But I think having the spending cap, it kind of evens the playing field. I mean, you look at, the NHL, where it's like, okay, teams have, cap of $75 million per year to build the best team possible throughout their developmental and their pro teams. And you very, very rarely see the same team win the Stanley Cup more than 3 times in 10 years. It's very rare. But, I think that's what makes it great because you never know who's going to win. And I feel like if F1 is able to get a little bit more of that, all right, who's going to win? Because we really don't know what team is going to win.
At least among the top 3.
Yeah.
I don't see, no disrespect to Haas, I don't see Haas or, a Racing Point getting up there and mixing it up with a Mercedes anytime soon, even with this. But
you never know. But I'd like to dream, okay? But if they're able to close that gap, it might just be come down to who's the better racer that day instead of like, oh hey, look, this guy has a car that's like so much better than the other cars. It's like not even close.
Yeah, nobody's going to win a race in a Williams right now. And something else that wasn't part of the official F1 announcement, but does affect this country. The US TV rights have been renewed with ESPN, and of course it's not really ESPN, it's Sky Sports feed, broadcast and simulcast by ESPN for 3 more seasons, so through 2022.
I don't like ESPN, so I definitely could see them going more.
To be fair, They are broadcasting these races commercial-free. They really owned up to their disastrous debut last year. Yeah, I mean, I think we have a good system right now in place for TV deals here. I wouldn't have minded seeing somebody like NBC come back and try to do their own coverage.
I mean, ESPN, it's a safe bet because, ESPN is one of the biggest sports organizations in the world. So having it stream on there it's a safe bet. And, for the most part, it's going to be a decent product. So,
yeah. All right. So something I just want to hit really quickly that's broken that we haven't gotten a chance to talk about yet. We've mentioned Fernando Alonso kind of branching out, trying all these new racing series and trying to win as many big events as he can. He's going to go for the Dakar rally in a couple months here. So something totally brand new to him off-road. Do you have any opinions on that, Chase?
I mean, this is one of the few cases where, championships are like Pokemon. You can indeed catch them all. And I think, you know what? Why not? Like, he's at the point where he's already one of the most accomplished drivers. He really doesn't need to prove anything anymore. So at this point, it's like, you know what? I might as well go out and have fun and try a whole bunch of stuff I've never done before and just, be a true master of my craft. And I think he's doing that. I mean, the Dakar rally, it's something I've never heard of before, but I definitely think it's going to be an interesting, it's definitely, having Fernando Alonso.
It's really one of the most prestigious events in off-road racing. I don't know too much about it either, but I've tried to keep up with it the last couple of years, and I know Alonso said in the past this is one of the big races that he wants to tackle.
I mean, hey, you know what? Power to you. And I mean, off-road racing doesn't get enough love sometimes, but I would love to see him win this. And I mean, the fact that Fernando Alonso is going to be in this race immediately is going to, draw attention. So I'm excited to see it. So
yeah. So more drama out of the whole Aero McLaren Schmidt-Peterson or whatever the heck the team's name is going to be next year with all the partnerships they've got. And James Hinchcliffe. We mentioned last week briefly that James Hinchcliffe is out at that team after they originally said they were going to honor his contract. Turns out Hinch wasn't actually fired. He's still technically under contract with them, not to drive. They are going to pay him his salary, but in order to earn it, he has to appear with the team as essentially a spokesman or a PR person. So he can't drive, and this
you
really
can't see
puts
my
him...
face of disgust right now.
Yeah.
I wish you could.
It's not a good look, and it really puts him in an awkward position because, like we mentioned, hey everybody, it's Ben editing the podcast, and I have some unfortunate news. We had some technical difficulties when we were recording in the studio, and unfortunately lost about 12 minutes of the show. So I'm going to do my best. I don't have Chase with me, but I'm going to fill you guys in on what we talked about. Continuing with Hinchcliffe, like I was saying, it's a difficult situation because the McLaren Schmidt-Peterson team is a Chevy operation, and Hinchcliffe is still the face of Honda. There was talk about him pursuing a ride with a Honda team. Maybe Ganassi's name was coming up. But with this revelation that he's still contractually obligated to make appearances for McLaren SP, it's going to make that a lot more difficult. So we talked about that for a little while longer, and Chase mentioned that he was not happy with the situation, thought it was a bad look. I totally agree. And I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm sure it's going to continue to play out over the next couple of months, and we'll see exactly what Hinchcliffe is doing in 2020 in regards to the IndyCar Series, if anything, if he's even on track, or if he's just a spokesman for McLaren like it looks like at the moment he's going to be. So then we got into the NASCAR news, and honestly, I don't have much to say about the Texas race weekend. You know how I feel about how they've ruined that track with the reconfiguration. Christopher Bell won the Xfinity race, locked up a championship 4 spot. Not too unsurprising. Bell's been strong all year. He's my pick to win the championship. And in the Cup Series, Kevin Harvick won for the 3rd straight year of the Fall Texas race. Stewart-Haas Racing looked strong. All 4 of their cars did. Were all up front at some point. And a 1-2-3 finish with Almirola in 2nd and Daniel Suarez in 3rd. Major storylines for Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott running into problems. So it puts them in a difficult situation heading into Phoenix. Both are essentially in must-win situations. And the Championship 4 could very well be the same that they were last year, and that's exactly how they run at the moment. Joey Logano and Kyle Busch currently hold the 2 final spots, along with Martin Truex Jr., who obviously won at Martinsville, and Kevin Harvick, who won the Cup race at Texas. So much for the playoff system allowing for upsets and parity. It looks like it could just be the same championship 4 once again, so we'll have to see how that plays out. We also have some rumors regarding Honda. NASCAR is very much interested in adding a 4th and maybe even potentially 5th, if there's enough interest, manufacturer to the series as soon as possible, or when the new car comes out, new regulations or whatever. Honda has been mentioned as a top candidate for that, but a jump would likely require them to pull out of both IndyCar and IMSA. If Honda were to take this seriously, the resources needed would make all of those programs very difficult to coexist. And personally, I think it would be a great loss for the IndyCar Series to lose Honda, assuming they don't find a replacement, because then that means every car is running a Chevy engine, and it just continues to go more down towards that spec direction, which you don't want it to go. And IMSA as well, I think it would be a loss for them. Another thing potentially holding Honda back is that, of course, NASCAR would want them to compete in all 3 of their national touring series at the very least. They don't really have a truck here in the states that they produce to compete with Toyota's Tundra, Chevrolet's Silverado, or Ford's F-150. So how Honda would fit into the truck series, I'm not really sure. Maybe they'd only be competing in Cup or Xfinity. I really don't know how that would work out, but it's an interesting barrier that they're going to have to try to find a way to get around, because NASCAR would almost certainly want them participating fully if they do enter the sport. And finally, moving into the F1 Grand Prix in the United States and Circuit of the Americas, Valtteri Bottas won and Lewis Hamilton finished second for yet another Mercedes 1-2, and the second place run was all Hamilton needed to clinch his 6th World Drivers' Championship. So where Hamilton stands now is 5 podiums, 8 wins, and 1 championship away from tying those 3 records that are all held by the great Michael Schumacher. So we'll now bring you back to the podcast. Chase and I are talking about Ferrari's underwhelming season once again, and how Mercedes have just been so dominant over the last few years.
Yeah, but I'm just going to take everything.
Well, now we know, we see Ferrari this season, they're half a second a lap faster than Mercedes in preseason testing, and then we get to the first 5 races of the year, Mercedes sweep a 1-2 in all of them.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did Ferrari just fall off, or Mercedes sandbagging? I think we've come to realize this season that preseason testing is not a very good indicator. You really have to wait until you get to Melbourne.
I think it could also just come down to the driver. That's something you always have to look at, because, I would much rather have a really well-trained driver than, putting myself in a race car. Who's going to win? Guarantee you it's going to be the professional, I can tell you that much. It's those little seconds here and there where it's like, okay, what angle do you come in? Obviously the technology now where it's going to, that whole issue is going to be becoming less and less. It's going to be about the technology, but I feel like, the quality of racers can't be overlooked either. So,
yeah, I think Lewis is just one of those athletes where, you can love him, you can hate him, you can have your opinions on him, on or off the track, but you just can't help but admire what he's done. It's unbelievable.
The only example that I can think of right now that's even close to this was, I think, just when you get to that, that old school, rivalry between the Yankees and Red Sox, with Derek Jeter and, Jason Varitek. The guys hated each other on the field, but, for the most part, they had the utmost respect for each other.
Yeah, and then Sebastian Vettel was one of the first people in the cool-down room to come over and congratulate him.
Seriously, these are your competitors, but at the same time, you grow to respect each other because, you see what all of them are capable of, and you just sometimes, you just got to tip your cap and just be like, yep, he got me. So, that's what I really enjoy about the whole racing, sport. It's we don't necessarily, on the track, we want nothing more than to completely crush, but, off the track, it's what, we can laugh about it, hey, good job, and we can talk fondly about it, laugh about the little things like that. Obviously, some of these rivalries are heated. You see all these bench-clearing brawls between teams sometimes. You see that more in NASCAR, but that's probably because, a bunch of angry rednecks. But, that rivalry in sport, it can't be overlooked. But at the same time, it's you still got to tip your cap and you still got to respect them. So.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up, I think, for this week's edition of the Photo Finish. Next week, NASCAR has a quadruple header in Phoenix. K&N West is there for their season finale, and the Trucks, Xfinity, and Cup Series will determine the championship four for those series. And I've got something really special to announce. Brett Moffitt and his GMS racing team through Wounded Warrior Project and Plan B Sales, they're running a salute to veterans. Of course, it's Veterans Day weekend coming up here. My high school literature teacher, Stephen Rippon, is an Air Force veteran, and his name is going to be on Brett Moffitt's truck Friday night at ISM Raceway. And it's something very special that was an opportunity that kind of fell into my lap that I wanted to do for him. So the paint scheme and truck's been announced, or been revealed rather, on their social media handles. So yeah,
that's incredible.
It's exciting. Yeah. Looking forward to seeing that truck out on the track.
Yeah, and one more other bit of news. Ben, obviously we're going to be definitely diving in more as this Penske story develops. So we're going to have him on our show at the end on Thursday nights. Make sure to tune in, check the Instagram, check the bio, do all that jazz, because we do want to dive into this, because this is, I don't think we can really accurately say enough about how big of a story this is yet, because we still don't have all the details, but still, I think make sure to tune in Thursday night. Better be there. Better be listening. So,
yeah. And for those of you following on YouTube, I will definitely grab the file for that and get that show up here as well eventually. So,
I mean,
stay on the lookout for that.
We're gonna make an Instagram at some point. We don't know when. It's gonna come eventually. We just don't know yet. So, all right.
Well, for Chase Draus, I'm Ben Schneider. We'll see you guys. We'll see you Thursday night. We'll see you here for this show next week. Have a good night, everybody.
Peace.